better understand what needs to happen next, can you talk about the gaps you found in the research you did with the districts in Riverside County?
Yeah, well, one of the things that was really interesting is although the districts knew that there was an achievement gap, everybody's been talking about the achievement gap for years, and so they really didn't own it themselves. So one of the things that I did is I created what I call the CST achievement gap analysis, where I took all of just the data from the CST, wasn't aggregated for AYP or API or anything, and just looked at the raw data. And for each of the sites that I work with, I go through for each kind of test that's taken there, show the average percent correct for all students, and then I tease out the data for the English-only students, for their English learners, and then I show the gap between the two groups. And in this case, in this particular site, you can see there's a large gap, 36 percentage points, 44 percentage points, and 38 percentage points at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, respectively. And then I tease out the data for the reclassified, the students, former English learners who are now been reclassified and said that they are redesignated and ready to run. But look at what they're doing. They are in the positive. In other words, they are outpacing and beating out the English-only students at the site by 26, 16, and 15 percentage points, respectively. What I do when I share this with districts and with sites, what it does is it energizes them because they realize the work that it's going to take to get these guys, the English learners, to the level of being able to be redesignated will have a great benefit for not only the individual student, which should be the ultimate motivation factor, but also look at the great contribution they're making to the data at the site. And if you were to pull that out of the data for the site overall, it would be a very different picture for many of these sites and these districts. So what they're able to do is to encourage teachers to keep up the work that they're doing to support the students as English learners, because look at where they're going to go and what they're going to be able to do. But you may notice that I have a number here in parentheses after each one. Sometimes I have teachers who have only 1 or 2 English learners all day long in their classes, and for them the needs of the other students in their class sometimes overwhelm them, and to the point where they don't seem to have the time or the ability to address the needs of these 1 or 2. So I share with them what the total number are by grade level. That's a whole class. Would it ever be acceptable for a whole class of English-only students to be 36 percentage points behind another class? Probably not. And so that's what we try to do, is encourage them as a grade level and department, at the secondary level especially, to really consider them to be all of the grade levels' responsibility, not just individual teachers. This also allows to speak to access, allowing the principals and the teachers and the administrators at the district to see whether students are getting access to core classes. For instance, I often find that there's very few, if any, English learners in algebra in 8th grade, in middle school. And when we look at high school, they're not getting to algebra until 10th or 11th grade, and then they're not doing very well. And so it really talks to how can we structure the resources we have. We don't have a lot of money, but we have resources to be able to allow those students access to those core classes. Because if they're not moving on to algebra until high school and well into high school, they're never going to be able to get to those A through G requirements to be able to be well prepared for college and career and graduating high school, ready to go. In fact, we find that one of the biggest issues for our long-term English learners at the secondary level, especially when they hit high school, because they still have to have a period of ELD and they're often in intervention classes, that they don't get to take those A through G requirements, and subsequently they're at risk. They're the ones greatest at risk for not graduating. They have the lowest passage rate on the KC, the California High School Exit Exam, and so it has implications, and it kind of snowballs as they continue to move through schools. So when we look at it, it was an interesting, in the Title III work we do here in the county, that not every district and not every site continues to have ELD for their students, even though it is recommended by the CDE and the federal government that they continue to receive English language development through the time that they're reclassified. We find that many sites, even level 1 and 2 students at the secondary level, are not receiving an individual class period of English language development every day. They're just in the general population, and the thought is eventually they'll get it. And it's interesting that they're surprised when they don't. And so that's one of my leadership roles, is to influence them to consider restructuring and reallocating their resources to provide that kind of support for their students, so that we can move away from this long-term English learner issue to putting kids back on that normative track.
I found in working with, as an assistant superintendent, working with schools, that English learners tended to do fairly well till they hit 3rd grade. if they started out in kindergarten with English only, and they got some English language development, there was not much of a gap. And then third grade hit. My interpretation was that's when content hit. Would you agree, or do you see some other reasons why that shift goes like this, starting at about third grade?
Well, and I taught third grade for years, and so I know what happens when the kids hit that wall at third grade. What happens at third grade is you have less context with their let's say, their reading. In their reading anthologies, instead of a picture on every page and the text being directly linked to that picture, there's a picture every 2 or 3 pages, or it may be about an abstract topic not necessarily related to the reading itself. And so it becomes much more challenging for the students. And as you move through the year, the amount of text that they're expected to read and the academic language that's included in that text, it moves from, in second grade, very simple and straightforward sentences to very compound and complex sentences in third grade and beyond, which really puts them at risk because they're not able to hold on to the meaning to get through all the way through that compound or that complex sentence. Mm-hmm. And so they may be very fluent. They may be able to read every word that's in that text, but understanding what those words are saying, they don't have the comprehension because they're not able to hold on to it for the longer and longer sentences and the more complex sentences that they're encountering. They do have greater exposure to content and history, social science, and science at that grade level, and math at third grade becomes more word problems than anything else. But again, it's just about them being able to understand what's going on. And oftentimes, because they can read fluently, there's an assumption at the end, and there's a lot of focus in the field right now on fluency, reading fluency. For our English learners, that's kind of it gives us a false sense of security sometimes about their reading ability. For instance, for me with Spanish, even though I have my degree in Spanish, my credential, I speak pretty fluent Spanish, I can read anything in Spanish, but I won't necessarily know what it means.
I agree. I can do the same thing.